I want to introduce somebody very special. You know, I've been in this industry now for 21 years, and people ask me, why did you get in this? And the first response was, well, 21 years ago, there wasn't much going on, and computers seemed good. But I got in, and I got into security. And when I was talking security 21 years ago, I almost got fired in the first 7 or 8 years of my career for talking security because nobody wanted to hear about it. And I kept bringing it up, and it was delaying projects, and got pulled aside a few times. So finally, I quit that job and went somewhere else where they actually liked security. But my point is, one of the key reasons I love security, and I took an interest in it, there's a little book. Anybody here read The Cuckoo's Egg? Yeah? Yeah? You read that one, sir? Yeah. It's really interesting. From my perspective, it lit a fire, and I think for most of the guys here, it lit a fire in us for InfoSec. And I think it's the first really well-documented, what I like to call forensic examination of an incident, and very well documented. And we're very lucky, all the way from Oakland, California, to have the author of that book, and just an all-around great guy who loves lemonade. So if you get him a drink, make sure it's lemonade. Please join me in welcoming Clifford Stoll to the stage.
Great. Oh, conference says here conference badges are needed to gain it. I came out here mostly to meet some people, but I got arm twisted in doing a talk. I went up into my attic to dig up the audiovisual things from the talk that I gave at the NSA down at Fort. 30 years ago, I found in my attic my original view graphs. Those of you who are over 50 years old probably recognize these. And I tried to find an overhead projector here. Turns out there are none in Halifax. And the AV crew informs me that there not only are none to be found in Nova Scotia, but document cameras also have become extinct. As a result, the way I'll do my talk, since I'm allergic to PowerPoint, is simply hold these up and allow you to see them, and more or less read from them. And so the first slide is just gobbledygook saying I'm Cliff Stoll, and you don't care about that. The second one here, visible. Zoom in, zoom please. You'll notice that it has about 30 or 40 or 50 logos on it, because Lawrence Berkeley Labs, where I came from, used to have a rule that said every slide, every view graph, every PowerPoint has to have a logo on it. So I figured on the average, you've now seen a logo. The next thing worth mentioning, it's wonderful to have these overheads because it organizes your talk. Anyway, the next thing is to just say thank you to a bunch of people, all of whom are right here. Let's see. Is this visible to you? Nope. Good. Thank you to all the people listed. People like Eric Beals, Dave Cleveland, Gil Johnson. These were people that I worked with in the mid-1980s, several of whom were heavy-duty Unix jocks and taught me everything I don't know today about Unix. And these are... Yes, no? Them's the people who did all of the work. I'm here just to sort of claim credit for it, which is the standard way of working in computing, namely, make sure credit belongs to you and blame belongs to somebody else. So I'm there and, cool. Go back to the mid-1980s. There's a few gray beards here. Probably most of you weren't around then, but those of you who remember in the mid-1980s, computer security didn't exist. At the time, I was an astronomer working at Lawrence Berkeley Labs, managing a bunch of Unix workstations and trying to design some off-axis hyperboloids to build into the Keck 10-meter telescope. And I was having a great time doing numerical analysis when the grant ran out, and I sort of had to go downstairs. And, oh, cool. You don't want to hear about how I had to go down, you don't want to know how I was an astronomer trying to figure out how to design telescopes, and the grant ran out, and I had to go find a job working at the computer center because I was a physics jock, and there were no such things as computer jocks at the time. So I changed hats, and on the first, oh, cool. It says, oh, you can almost read it. It says, what do you do when you find an intruder? Remember, this is a talk I gave at the NSA, and they said, oh, this is, would you talk about what happens when somebody breaks into your computer? And so I'm worried about, what do you do when somebody's breaking into your computer? Well, obvious things. You disable his access. You cork up whatever computer security holes you have. You tell your systems users about it, but you don't publicize it. You keep your mouth shut. You don't tell people about it. So I figure, okay, well, these are obvious rules for how to handle a computer security incident. This is the 1986 version of system response. However, nobody taught me that in physics, so when I find somebody breaking in my system, I let the bastard in. I let the guy in, right? I keep the hole wide open, but I want to monitor everything. I want to see all the traffic coming in. I want to see all the traffic going out. I want to know what's happening here. Look at that while I'm telling them what it says. I want to, not even visible. Do you have a cell phone? Put the flashlight on that. I want to monitor all the traffic coming in, all the traffic going out. Meanwhile, I want to make noise. I want to tell people about this. I want to tell the right people, which in 1986, I thought, included the NSA. 30-some years later, it means you. In my opinion, central to doing good computer security is telling people what's going on. What have you discovered? What have you come up with? And today, 30, 35 years later, the same thing is true. However, the field has at best evolved and at worst become rather more interesting. So with that, cool. Why don't I just put these over there? That'll work. In other words, what happens, may I draft you to throw my slides? Wonderful, wonderful. Look at this. All right. This is, you'll have to put a piece of white paper behind it because the professional camera person, it just flipped that. And happily, the microphone doesn't work either. So, yes, no? What's cool about this is it reminds me of what to say, and yet it isn't really PowerPoint, but it's poor man's PowerPoint from way back long ago. When you don't understand something, when you can't figure it out, do the kind of research that you learned in freshman physics. Do the kind of research. Namely, you apply what few physical principles you can figure out. You think hard about, you know that there's a connection from someplace to someplace else. You know that within your CPU, there has to be a link from whatever malware is happening to an outside source. You keep a notebook. One of the things that astonishes me about the nature of computing is how nobody writes anything down. Everyone will keep enormously elaborate logs, and we'll save it, we'll analyze it with Splunk, we'll go through and feed it through Wireshark. But amazingly, hardly anyone writes things down in handwriting in a notebook. I was brought up in physics that you go to the observatory and if you make an observation, next morning it had better be in your notebook, because if it ain't, it didn't happen. You're going to have to go back and do it again. So write things down. What else? Is there another thing that well, I need to see my notes, or else I'll start talking about other things. No, go back a slide. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Keep a notebook. Do your own homework. What do I mean by do your own homework? This is basic physics, people. Don't let somebody else have the fun of doing your work. If there's anything that I can say, it's this, that going through your logs, going through your system and understanding your local area network is a joy and a gas, because that's who we are. We're computer jocks trying to figure out an enormously elaborate system. And trying to find what mouse or what rats are hidden in this mess of ether that we have in our back rows. Find new methodologies, compile statistics, trust only what you can prove. You'll have lots of worries, and you'll say, I think it's this, but trust only what the chain of evidence says you can do. Publish your results. To me, if you don't write it down, it didn't happen. If you don't publish it, if you don't get up and give a talk about it, it's going to happen again, but it's going to happen to somebody else. Speak out on the troubles that you have. You'll be astonished that people will come up to you and say, boy, I had the same troubles. Finally, don't give up. Everyone will tell you to stop doing this. Hey, we're in crunch time. We can't let you do this. Don't give up. What's next? Do I have another slide coming up? Yes, no? Oh, hot damn. On the subject of publishing, I published a paper in the communications of the ACM, the Association for Computer Machinery, called Stalking the Wily Hacker in April 1987, about how I caught a hacker. And I thought that would be the end of it. I figured, after I write this, I've published, I can go back to doing physics. Yeah, right. I then wrote a funny short book called The Cuckoo's Egg, and I thought, I don't have to worry about this anymore. I can go back to doing physics and astronomy. Not likely. Go to the next slide and see what's there. What does it say? Zoom in, I can't read it. What happened to, I'll just go back and read it. Gang, I'm sorry, overhead projectors are obsolete, and so is everything that I know. Yeah. We did all of this on zero budget. We had 1/4 of a full-time equivalent, 1/4 of an FTE to do all computer security. Our total budget in 1986 for all of computer security was $0. Taking into account inflation today, that's equal to $0 million. So, I'd rather be doing, I'd rather be doing physics. Beyond that, I have no expertise. I have no experience. I can't publicize this. There were no online web blogs to publicize this. And I don't want to tip my hand anyway. Finally, I have no mandate. Nobody said, look, Cliff, it's your job to track down this guy. You gotta catch this guy. Quite the opposite. People said, including my boss, cut this out, go and do the work that you're supposed to do. And my feeling was the work I'm supposed to do is exactly this. There was a one-to-one onto mapping, as you say in math, but our funding agency said if you allow this to become known, Congress will cut your money, will double that amount and cut it from your budget. So what do you do? What do you do when you're broke, when you're stupid, and when you're discouraged? What you do is you come up with very primitive tools. You use a screwdriver as a chisel and a crescent wrench as a hammer. You come up with cheap methodologies because there's nothing else. You're broke. And you come up with creative solutions. My point here is not, oh, this is what I did a long time ago. No, this is what all of us can and should be doing, because the amount of smartness I had when I detected this guy breaking into our system was zero. So, where should I go from here? Is there another slide after this, or is that the end of the talk? Shine your flashlight on that for a minute. And I really can't see what I'm doing. If I let that happen, I'll be, well, maybe. Anyway, let me just tell you what happened. So it's, the middle of excellent. I can almost read it now. Oh yeah, cool. What happened? In 1986, August, I had left the telescope project to work down in the downstairs at the computer system. We had a bunch of Unix workstations built by Sun, a bunch of VAX VMS systems built by Digital Equipment, and the usual melange of Microsoft and Apple computers spread around. It was in the early days of Ethernet, and we had this thing called a Cisco router, which we were all trying to figure out, how does it work? One day, Eric Beals, one of the real computer jocks that I was working with, comes up to me, and it was like my second day on the job. Guy comes up to me and says, hey, Cliff, we've got a computer accounting problem. The accounts for the system just died. And figure it out. The way it was built was we had an accounting system. We hired a freshman at University of California, Berkeley. We hired this freshman to come over and build an accounting system so that every time somebody was on our system, we'd charge them nickel and dimes. We'd just ding them a little bit of money, depending upon how much time they used, and then funnel it off and pad our wallets with it. Our idea was to just pay for the computing time they used, the network time, and so on. And so every entry in the etc password file in every one of our systems would be mirrored into the accounting. And one day, the accounting program was dead in the water, which meant that we were losing money. And, not much. But one day, Eric Beals comes by and says, Cliff, the accounting is off by about, 75 cents, 85 cents. It's just not working. So I looked at it and spent an afternoon playing with it, and I found, there's a, you don't have to, you can turn your flashlight off if you want. So I figured, hey, look, this is a worthwhile thing to investigate. Why is the accounting program broken? And so I started looking at it. Turned out that there was a user who had an entry in the password file of one of the Unix boxes that didn't have a mirrored entry in the accounting program, saying, this is weird. I started looking carefully at that and realized that somebody was using our system to the tune of several minutes, maybe 20 minutes to half an hour a day, and getting away with it without being charged. And I'm thinking, how's that possible? And so one day I go off, and I'm off in some astronomy seminar being bored, and you're sitting there in a boring astronomy seminar. I'm thinking, how's that possible? And it occurs to me, in order to add a user to the password file, somebody has to be root. Somebody has to have system manager privileges. And I start thinking about it, and I say, whoa, this is interesting. This is weird. And, producer, should I be on the stage rather than here? Does anybody care? No, okay. Here.
Don't trust that.
Don't trust that one. Okay. This one either. So I start following this, and I'm wondering, how do you figure out what's going on? So I went over to the password file. I say, it looks good to me. And it was a Friday morning when I started looking at this, and I realized that most likely somebody was sneaking into my system and had added a user, which shouldn't be possible. And so I did what anybody else would. I did the same thing that everybody here would do. I said, I'm going to monitor all the traffic coming in and going out of my system over the weekend. It's Friday. I'll just go and see what's there. And I'm there, and I say, well, how do you monitor this? Remember, this is 1980. This is 30 years ago. And things like TCP dump and Wireshark were things you dreamt about. The tools at hand were, I had a bunch of things called teletypes. Anybody hear of a teletype? You have a beard. Do you have a gray beard? You know what this is, right? Yes. Oh, a teletype. These were mechanical things, right?
I read your whole book.
Oh, you read the book, but yeah. So teletypes were mechanical things that went point. There were impact printers, and so I went around. So one of the very, very few things that I learned in graduate school, they don't teach you much in grad school, but there was one lesson I learned. The one lesson I learned was it's easier to apologize later than to get permission in advance. So I waited around till 5 o'clock, 5:30 on a Friday afternoon, and said, I gotta hook up. We have about 40 modem lines coming in, 40 or 50 modem and wide narrowband things coming in. I want to monitor them. The first way I'll monitor them is I'll just take the PC or the Mac off my desk, put it in, use clip leads to wire into the RS-232 connector. But after 2 or 3 or 5 PCs, you kind of run out of PCs and things to record data on. So I then got one of these lab carts, push carts over the lab, and went along Building 50, liberating people's PCs from their offices, just sort of going from office to office, helping them empty their desks. And by 7:30 or 8, I had a collection of about 40 or 50 PCs and Macintoshes and teletypes and decorators and things like this, all connected around to this group of modems and VAXs and Unix workstations with clip leads to do multi-drop RS-232, which is another story that a smart person, of course, any of you would say, why don't you just modify the kernel so that you record everything? But look, I'm a physics jock, not a programmer, and I knew that I'd break things and I'd get all sorts of cool error messages. So did this, came in, got a sleeping bag, a thermos of vegetarian minestrone soup, and went to sleep next to all of this. It woke up I'm sorry, I should stay on topic. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, look at that. I'm almost up to the second bullet point. I detected an intruder and he monitored his activity, watched this, traced things back, contacted, analyzed, and estimated. Okay, enough said. So I'm there and I'm saying, okay, I'm there and I'm seeing, next morning, it's 8, 9 in the morning. I'm still half asleep in my sleeping bag, right next to this old VAX 780 that was left over from the late Jurassic age, and surrounded by Unix workstations that had really nice warm fans that allowed you to sleep without needing a sleeping bag. And this guy comes in, Roy Kurth. He's the assistant director of the lab. So he's got a beard and a tie. He's important. But it's Saturday morning, so the tie is missing, but the beard is there. And he sort of kicks me out of the sleeping bag, and he says to me, I understand that some offices are missing some computer equipment. And I'm lying there surrounded by these things, and I say, I haven't the slightest idea. I have no idea. And he says it would be a right neighborly thing if all of it were returned. To which I say, oh, well, sure. And I start hauling the stuff back up, pushing on lab carts up to building 50A, 50B, and getting it back to where it belongs. And on one of these printers is 10, 20 meters of printout of how somebody has come into our system across from a modem, logged into our Unix box, used a cron tab set user ID to root program to fire every 5 minutes, fire up a process that changes his account from guest to root privilege, turn off the accounting system to follow him, and then once accounting was shut off and he had root privilege, to go out across our local area network into something called a Cisco router, which I'd never even knew that we had, and then started systematically breaking into or logging into military computers around North America. And I'm looking at this. I mean, no kidding. Looking at this printout, and I'm saying, this is absolutely weird. It's utterly nonlinear because this is Berkeley, California. You know, you could imagine somebody breaking into a computer and stealing granola recipes, but it's Berkeley. You don't, and, you know, so I start looking at what he's grepping for. I'm looking at what this guy is looking for, and it's stuff like atomic things and rocket tests, and I'm saying, this is bizarre. What's going on here? Why am I? And so it immediately becomes clear how to cork things up. I see what our set user ID to root hole is. I see that a mailing protocol, something called the post office protocol, had been installed with set user ID to root that shouldn't have been. Somebody made a minor mistake in doing this, but that didn't answer the real question, namely, why is somebody breaking in and using our system like this, and besides that, what's going on? So what did I say next on that view? Just tell me. What does it say? Yeah, that one. What does it say? Oh, yeah, we watch over. So, oh, yeah, of course. So I'm there and I'm saying, you know, it's a scientific institution, so what's going to happen is Monday we have a meeting. Naturally, nothing ever happens without a boring meeting. So Monday morning there's a meeting where everybody in people from computing, physics, and the lab director. The lab director shows up, and Roy Kurth is there, and he doesn't just have a beard and a tie, but he's got a suit. So I'm there, and I'm trying to describe all this stuff, and the lab director says, look at this. This guy is breaking into our computer. He has access to all of our files, all of our data. He can tamper with anything that he wants. He can erase anything that he wants. He's holding us without. He's genuinely in charge of our computers. And the director of the lab, Dave Shirley, says, this is important. I want you to catch the guy. Take all the personnel, all the resources, all the time you need. I want you to catch the guy. If it takes 3 weeks, I want you to find out who it is. So I had 3 weeks to fool around and find out who it is. So how much time do I have? Timekeeper. Infinite time. Okay. So I said to myself, okay, I got to do something about this. Where do I go? So again, I pretty much did what anyone in this room would do, although I must say things like Splunk and Wireshark didn't exist. But I did the manual equivalent of this. Print it out and watch things. I set up a serial line analyzer so that when any of the passwords that were compromised were used, it would pull a relay, make an outbound telephone dialer and dial a pocket pager that I had, and it would send Morse code to me telling me what was going on. Of course, today, the concept of a pocket pager doesn't exist. The idea of Morse code over an analog voice line doesn't exist. The word analog doesn't exist. So this is the mentality that I was in, and I assumed that, again, any of you would do this in a much more elegant and eloquent method. But I'm fooling around. So over the next... throw that slide on once again. Turn your flashlight on and see what it says. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, yeah. Over the next year, we watched him try to break into about 450 computers, manually, one by one, typing IP networks in. And there were almost entirely military and defense contractors. Meanwhile, is this visible even? We traced things back to the source, which was, we traced things backwards to the source, which at the time, the FBI, when I made this slide, the FBI wouldn't say he was coming from Hanover, Germany. They said, no, we're prosecuting, so don't mention that it's from Hanover. We traced this back to a group of computer hackers in Hanover, Germany, which at the time was in West Germany, and they were working with a group in East Germany and selling passwords, information gleaned, and the whole kit and caboodle to a group called the Stasi, and the Stasi doesn't exist anymore. So again, this is all dreamland out of history that a few of you may remember these words, but most of you will recognize them as times of an easier day when there were good guys and bad guys and there was a difference between them. Today, it's hard to tell. So it took a year to trace things back. Of course. Meanwhile, it's visible on these slides, but I'll just point to it here. Meanwhile, we contacted anybody that we thought might be interested, namely the Department of Energy, the FBI, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, National Computer Security Center, the NSA, CIA, anybody, the local police even. And it turned out that we learned right away that everyone wanted to hear what was going on. Everybody wanted to see my logbook and my notebook, but nobody was willing to help. It's this bizarre idea that, well, sure, we want to know what's going on, but solve your problem? No. When you solve your problem, tell us about it. So, in addition, there were really severe communication protocol problems. For example, in talking to at the time, no one had heard of the internet. The internet essentially didn't exist. It was called the ARPANET, and the ARPANET was owned and operated by the military, and the Air Force Office of Special Investigations was in charge of security for it. And the language that I spoke was different from the language that they spoke. So there was this, an impedance mismatch, where getting any traffic across the network was difficult because the language didn't agree. There was no mapping function. What else did I say down there? Something else there? We analyzed traffic keywords targets, and sure enough, it was almost all military stuff. People were looking at military things. And again, this is utterly bizarre. Somebody's trying to commit espionage over the computer networks. And finally, we found that of 400 to 500 computers that somebody tried to break into, it was simple statistics to say, the guy got into about 20% of these. 1 in 25% of these this guy broke into. In other words, computers were surprisingly poorly secured. Noticeably more than a few percent were absolutely open and vulnerable. Unlike today, when probably 1 in 20 computers is open and quite vulnerable. So, some things don't change. Go on to the next slide if you can. I'd like to know what to say next, if anything. Oh, hot damn. Probably not visible to you people. Our idea was, here's our chance to catch somebody. If it's our chance to, if somebody's breaking, we're going to try to catch this person and go after them and find out who's there. So ring an alarm if the guy's up. To me this meant, put a hardware serial line analyzer and look for the bit stream that corresponds to a password that's been compromised, and then have it pull a relay in and pull a dialer and dial a pocket pager. This is primitive stuff, but it was a primitive time back before there were things. It was a primitive time back before people put sugar in their coffee. It was a time when there were. It was a time when having such things as cell phones in your pocket was unheard of, and so we figured, okay, we'll try to catch this guy. We'll try to see what's going on. We'll also have periodic meetings that would say things, we'd ring an alarm whenever the guy comes through. We'll print out what he does. If there's obvious danger, if somebody's obviously breaking in and about to delete our files, do it rm *.*, we'll disconnect the guy, but the problem is you have to be careful about disconnecting somebody. You don't just want to pull the plug or do a sudo and remove the guy. You want to know that he's not watching, so I would go over and take my keys and jangle them against the comm lines, the serial lines that were connected in, so that the protocol would slow down and slow down and slow down due to the error correction until the person was unable to do much. My idea was conceal as much as possible that I'm watching. Meanwhile, what else happened? Notify authorities, which was largely a waste of time. Notify other sites directly, make a phone call if necessary. Keep things off net. That was pretty easy to do because there wasn't much of a net, and protect our users. So, enough of an introduction. Watching this guy, we watched him try to break in, stolen, blah, blah, blah. We watched for keywords and garbage like this. We watched them systematically break into 10 or 20, 30 sites, and it was a pretty nutty time. Meanwhile, our local trace, oh, you want it to turn this way, right? Look at that, wow. We wanted to trace things so that, first, tracing things through our own local area network. This was the mid to late 1980s. Tracing things through our local area network was a phenomenal headache. Today, tracing things through the network in my own house is a headache. I'm astonished how poorly documented and what poor software there is to just tell you what your network looks like. Forget tracing things over the network where you have real IP numbers. It's hard to figure out what connects to what and what's going over a particular cable or who's connected over Wi-Fi or Bluetooth at any instant. It's surprisingly poor, and the more things that allow me to do it, the more confused I get. And I was plenty confused then. After tracing things from that, we traced things through our local area network into a wide area network called TimeNet. From TimeNet, we found that we were connecting across North America we were able to trace the guy through California. We got a valid California search warrant that led us over to a place called McLean, Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C. In McLean, Virginia, we found that a place that actually specialized in computer security called MITRE, M-I-T-R-E, MITRE, the MIT Research Institute, was the source of our troubles. I and trying to find this place was quite challenging because our search warrant didn't work across states and getting across North America. But eventually we found out who it was and was able to show, oh, somebody's breaking in and they're coming out of your system, tell the guys, and they pull the plug on their modem. And we think, okay, that's the end of it. Instead, from then on, we found connections coming directly into our system from Europe. And we're able to see that somebody is using an X25 network, which was an early frame relay network, now thoroughly obsolete from TimeNet. Someone was connecting from Europe into our system in Berkeley, and the connection was by way of satellite links called IRC, an international record carrier. So we called up them. They put an engineer on it who stopped by my house, and we had a delightful evening together, which involved a pair of sneakers being dried out in a microwave oven, but that's another story that I won't tell you about. And during that time, the representative from TimeNet was able to show that the connection was coming from the University of Bremen in Bremen, Germany. So somehow there was a connection direct from Bremen, Germany, through TimeNet into Berkeley, into our computer, across there into the ARPANET, into military computers, filching information going backwards. None of which is surprising to anyone in this room. All of us like to talk about the cloud as if connections are meaningless. To me, connections are really important. I don't just want to know what the connection is from over here to over there. I want to see what the connections are. I want to see what the wiring is. Because really, I'm a physics jock. I like knowing what wires connect from here to there to elsewhere. And I'm curious to see how you get from here to there. Which is one of, I'm sorry. I should have pointed out, I do have an organization for my talk. Is this visible? Namely, when you think, of course, you actually believe that I'm following my PowerPoint slides. No, my talk is right here in my hand. Just before I start, I write down what I want to talk about, and what's on my thumb here is the word curiosity. Should there be anything that I leave you with, it's not, oh, go out and buy my book. It's not go out and do something great. No, it's be curious. It's the one thing that your boss will never tell you to do. Be curious. The people who are doing this kinds of thing, the people who are in charge will always tell you, oh, just obey the rules, just do what I'm telling you. My idea is it's your responsibility to figure things out and to make sure that your work is intellectually satisfying. Your job, whether it's teaching, whether it's research, whether it's grunt computing and programming, your job is to be curious, which to me leads directly to what I was saying here. Our idea was to trace things backwards across a computer network and try to figure things out. And ultimately we did. Some hacker uses a phone system in Hanover, connects to the German DATEX-P network through the international record carrier to TimeNet to Lawrence Berkeley Labs in Germany, across the ARPANET, the MILNET, and breaks into one MILNET site and then another. End of my story. As far as the NSA was concerned, this was all they wanted to know. Oh, 15, show it to them. I don't want to know about it. Sugar, thank you. And in more detail for my friends at the NSA, what are the details of how this happened? The DATEX network, University of Bremen, Microvax from there, connecting across networks and the DDN and so on. Meanwhile, we had an interesting problem. After 5 months in, we were able to localize the problem back to Hanover, Germany, but we found that here we are tracing things back in the middle of the night into Hanover, Germany, but the guy, either because of lousy phone lines or smarts on the part of the people breaking in, would disconnect after 15, 20 minutes. All of this happened way back, way long ago, when you remember when telephones were connected by things called wires? Yes. Oh, wait. You have to say yes.
Yes, I do.
Once upon a time, the thing in your pocket was called a wallet. Once upon a time, if you wanted to make a telephone call, you went over to the wall, you picked up this thing called a handset, and you put your finger in something called a dial. And you went zip, and go click, 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 click. Yeah, right? Yeah, right. Yeah, it was a rotary phone. Well, so there were these things called rotary phones. And the way they worked was as when you made a dial, 2, 3, 4 kilometers away, a bunch of solenoids and relays would go zip, click, 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 click. And in so doing, if you wanted to make a phone trace, you didn't type something in on a user interface and say, trace this number. You had to have a human being take a taxi cab to downtown Hanover and get out an ohm meter or voltmeter and start tracing solenoids in a big building called a central exchange. In other words, it would take an hour to make a phone trace. It just took 5 minutes to say it would take an hour to make a phone trace. And the problem was this guy would only connect for 20 minutes or half an hour. So the question was, how do I keep this hacker online for 15, 20 minutes, an hour, hour and a half. What's the next thing there? Just show me, quick. January 17, 1977, final traces to an individual, hints of involvement. Oh, cool. Oh, hot damn, I think if I remember right, is the next thing. Oh, glory be, oh, wonderfulness. Check this out. Oh, check this out. Absolutely sweet. Haven't you always wanted to be a chess champion? So, don't just tell me, tell everybody.
I would, yes.
Wouldn't it be cool to not just be an ordinary chess champion, but to get a chess rating 1,500, 1,800, 2,000? Say yes.
Yes.
This guy over here, no kidding, this guy, Arthur Bisquer, he's a, people need glasses. He's a what?
International Grandmaster.
Wait, don't tell me that, I already know it. Tell them that. He's a
International Grandmaster.
This guy, Arthur Bisquer, is an international grandmaster, and he's going to teach me and you how to always win at chess. And it shows right here. Check this out. Look at this. Look at this. Check this out. 10 tips on how to win at chess by an international grandmaster. And it turns out, all you need to know is rule number 2. He's going to give you 10 rules. If you only know rule number 2, you'll always win at chess. And because of mathematical game theory, this applies to computing. If you want to turn flashlight on. Yes. You want to win at chess, rule number 2, make the best possible move. Zoom in on that. That's where, make the best possible move. When in doubt, when you're trying to decide, should I make a lousy move or a good move? Make the best possible move, and you're guaranteed to always win. For those of you who are considering entering into a relationship, rule number 4 is also useful, namely, know what the men are worth. Having said that, what can I say? In the immortal words of the Oakland Tribune, Stoll and his sweetheart were in the shower together one day when they came up with a solution to trying to keep this hacker online. They'd build a very large file full of completely bogus information about the topics they knew the hacker was interested in. The time that he spent downloading it would give the police time to track him down. We tried to make the file look really bureaucratic and boring, his girlfriend said. If we had said, look here, it's classified information, he would have caught on right away. The trick worked. The hacker came across the file and spent more than an hour loading it into his own computer. During that time, German police were able to trace his telephone number. Stoll and his sweetheart celebrated their triumph with milkshakes made from homegrown Berkeley strawberries. So we did the obvious, namely, we created a completely bogus file, a set of these, containing what was then a huge amount of information, many, many megabytes of information, and allowed this guy time to just download it to this guy spent more than an hour downloading all of this garbage into his computer. And to make these bogus files, we didn't just make the usual bogus files. All we did was took bureaucratic college memos and research memos and changed people's names to colonel and general and lieutenant. And it turns out that bureaucratic memos are the same everywhere. They look and sound the same, and all you had to do is make it look more like, oh, this is secret stuff. Flip to the next thing. Is there a sample of what we put together? Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, sure. Visible, not. Probably not very visible. Those of you in the front row can see that this is all a dot matrix printer stuff. And if you look carefully, oh yeah, it says name, city, state, dear sir, blah, blah, blah. Look carefully up there and you'll see the more command. Those of you who are Unix jocks probably know about the less command, which is a way of printing things out on your screen. The less command evolved from the more command, and the more command evolved from cat, which was just to catenate files out. But this is one of dozens and dozens of files that this guy printed out, which in this case says, dear sir, thank you for your inquiry about the Strategic Defense Edition of Network. We're happy to comply with your request for more information, blah, blah, blah. Document 37.6, document 41.7. Here's a list of all this classified information you can have. All you have to do is send us a postcard or a letter, and we'd be happy to send you the following secret information. Just send us a letter, and we'll send it out to you. Well, it took the guy about 2 hours, an hour and a half, 2 hours to print all this out. Over the next couple days, we find that the German Bundeskriminalamt and the Bundespost have tracked the number back to source number 3A Glocksiestrasse, an apartment in Hanover, Germany. We find that indeed somebody from this place is breaking into our computer. They start phone traces, they keep tracking them. But they're clever police. They're not like me, they're smart. Rather than going in and busting them immediately, they wait. They wait for a month, 2, 3 months. 3 months after that file from our Unix computer gets uploaded into the, flip the next one. 3 months later, oh yeah, zoom in on this, Professor Camera Person. 3 months afterwards, we get a letter in the mail. No kidding. A letter comes for this completely fictitious secretary, the one that this fake secretary receives a letter in the mail from a guy named Laszlo Balo. And this guy says, oh, hey, I'm interested in the following documents, document 37.6, blah, blah, blah. Somehow or another, this fraudulent information that we placed on our Unix system in January, by April, had found its way into a Bulgarian engineer's typewriter in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So I'm there and I'm saying, this is weird stuff. In other words, something that we know only went to West Germany, somehow or another, showed up on some guy named Laszlo Balo. And I take a look at this letter. It says blah, blah, blah. It's addressed to the SDI Network Project in Berkeley, California. They spell our name wrong. Dear Mrs. Sherwin, blah, blah, blah. Laszlo Balo wants these documents. Absolutely weird. I mean, it's just weird. And I'm reading this stuff, and I'm looking at it, and I'm trying to keep my microphone on all at the same time. And I'm looking at this, and I say, oh my God, this is serious. You know, this is like some guy who's a spy. And so I did what anybody else would do in Berkeley. I call up the FBI, and the FBI says, oh my God, that's serious. Whatever you do, don't touch that letter. Bah! Because there's fingerprints on it. So put on some latex gloves, get a glassine envelope, find the letter that, oh, don't touch it. Don't touch that letter. It's got fingerprints on it. You're supposed to hold it up like this. You're supposed to put and you don't just hold it like this. You hold it by the middle because the fingerprints are all around the edge. And you sort of put it in this glassine envelope, and you go floop, floop, and then you take it over to the FedEx box in downtown Berkeley to get it over to the crime headquarters in Washington, D.C., but by accident along the way, I'm running over to the FedEx box. Entirely by accident, I bumped into a photocopier, so I now have a copy of this. How much time do I have? What? 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, okay. 10 minutes, okay. So, in short, following the, yeah, leave it. Following this, the FBI actually took me seriously for a short period of time, and was over the next 6 months prosecuted these people in Germany on charges of espionage. And it was one of those weird things of, hey, somebody's, and a group of 5 hackers, 1 committed suicide along the way, 3 others were convicted of espionage, and then the Berlin Wall came down and they were subsequently not imprisoned. Set the ball rolling for a number of different things, all of which is an introduction to what I wanted to say, which is outlined on my hand. And apparently I've got 5 or 6 minutes to say what I wanted to say. Let's see. I want to say thanks to Nick, thanks to Travis, of course. Orthogonality in computer security, routers. I mentioned our Cisco router, that we had Cisco router serial number 3. I did mention rule number 2 and rule number 4. I have a note saying that this is my left hand. I'm not sure why I have that. Left. It sounds like what I have to say is thoroughly and utterly obsolete. I agree with you, it is. There's nothing that I've said so far that I think you wouldn't do yourself, given the circumstances. Again, my idea is the curious person, when they see something that's out of the ordinary, will look at things and try to figure out, how do you deal with this? What do you do with it? What's the connectivity from over here to over there? What's the, how do things work? What's going on in my system? I gotta know. It's not enough to say, I was told X, Y, Z, or the man pages say A, B, C. No, I gotta understand. That's why we're here. So should I leave you with any words of wisdom? And I don't have wisdom, so I'll leave you with words, namely, be curious. Don't allow a weirdness in your system to go non-understood. One thing that I've been barking at for 5 or 6 years has been the idea that computer security works perfectly alongside efficient computing. That quality security does not get in the way of our users, but rather helps our users get along with one another and isolates them just the right amount from one another. That quality system management works well with quality security. one thing that I'm interested in is how to orthogonalize security from system administration so that a system administrator who really has keys to the whole system can be detected by the security personnel operating independently of one another. How do we make systems where we cannot fully trust the system manager? How can we make systems that will give us tripwire advance notice that there's trouble within the systems that we're managing? How can we make networks that will warn us when an idiot has done something stupid? To me, these are fascinating questions that happily are your domain for exploring and fooling around with. I would like to mention something I mentioned to Travis the other day, that I'm now making mathematical shapes called Klein bottles. Those of you who are mathematicians, those of you who have PhDs in mathematics, will immediately recognize this as a one-sided surface called a Klein bottle, and you'll say, wow, that's cool. Those of you who have PhDs in mathematics will say, wow, that is so cool and so neat, I gotta have one. Well, it just so happens that I'm donating this to Travis so that he can give this away tomorrow afternoon in ways that he will decide. And those of you who know about Klein bottles will say, yeah, but that one's made of glass. Can't you make it out of something more interesting? And the answer is, why, of course. With my wife, I've knitted a Klein bottle hat, as well as a matching Mobius loop scarf. And you'll notice that it works even on the East Coast. So thank you very much. However, I can't let you have it. Travis may when he gives this away tomorrow. So having said that, should I shut up or should I say something else?
Say more.
Say more. More. No. On my little finger over here, it says all truth.
Sure does.
Sure does. Okay, notice he even agrees with me. Going back a ways, in 1973, I was an undergraduate at the State University of New York at Buffalo, across from Fort Erie, and used to bicycle to Fort Erie, hang out with a couple of friends of mine. And while an undergraduate, there were riots going on campus, protesting some war or something like this. And the riots had nothing to do with me, because at the time I was studying physics. And as I was studying physics, I figured, riots, I don't care anything. So one April evening, the people were rioting on campus, and there was a midterm coming up in my physics department. So I said, I'm going to find out what's going on here. And so I'm walking across campus like 9 o'clock in the evening, and there's a policeman, a cop over there, looks at me and says, you're a student. And I say, yeah, I'm a student, but I'm not a rioter. I'm studying physics, statistical mechanics, thermodynamics, mechanics. The guy says, you're a student. And the guy reaches behind him, pulls out a rifle, and goes, kaboom! And a tear gas canister the size of a Pepsi-Cola can goes whoosh in front of me. I get a breath of tear gas, and I can't breathe. And this policeman's coming after me, and he wants to hit me over the head with a rifle because I'm a rioter. And I'm saying, I'm not rioting, I'm a student studying quantum mechanics and physics. And he chases me across campus over to the bell tower on campus. There's Campanile Bell Tower. I go running across campus. I'm saying, this is bizarre. What am I doing here? Why am I here? And this guy, I'm 22, 23 years old. The guy's chasing me across campus. I'm saying, this is nuts. I'm not rioting. I'm just being me. And he chases me in the building up 2 flights of stairs. There's a door about 1.5 meters tall, meter wide. I look at the door looks at me, I pull it open, I jump in, pull the door closed. It's the door to the bell tower. There's a policeman banging on the door, but I'm inside and the door is latched. I look around. It's the bell tower at the University of Buffalo. And I look around, it's dark. And even though it's dark, I can see that there's a machine with brass gears and a pendulum going tick, tick, tick. And I'm looking at this thing. This is weird. But I realize, oh, it's the clock. It's, the pendulum's driving a clock, and the clock is driving, it's one of these bell towers. It has a clock on the outside, like up by the Citadel. And I look at the clock, and I look at the pendulum. I realize that the mechanics of a pendulum say that if you shorten the pendulum, it ticks faster, lengthen it, it ticks slower, and the square root of the length is proportional to the period for small arc lengths. And I'm remembering my physics. I'm saying, okay, I can get that on the next week's midterm. But then I look from it, and from this set of gears, from this clock down here, is some dowels going up into some differential gears up high. So I walk up this staircase. As I walk up the staircase, I get to a place where I'm behind 4 clocks, and they're lit up. And the hands are moving backwards. Again, it's like the clock up here where you see from the front, it looks like, oh, it's right now been pointing to 12 o'clock for the past few weeks, but eventually the clock hands will start moving. But from the inside, the clock hands are turning backwards. I'm looking at it thinking, how do you get time to go backwards? What's the physics of turning time backwards? And I'm thinking about Lorentz contractions and I'm asking myself, why am I here? What am I doing here? I see that there's not a staircase, there's a ladder going from there. So I start climbing this rickety ladder, and I push open a hatchway, a little hatchway that goes up to the top, and where there's 4 bells. They're big brass bells, and they've been poured out of brass, and around it is a cupola, maybe 2 or 3 meters in diameter, and I can look out through the little arched windows and I can see down on campus. It's 10 o'clock at night, and I'm watching students throwing bricks at the police. I'm watching the police shooting tear gas at the students, and I'm saying, this is bizarre. What am I doing here? Why am I here? And then I remembered what my high school teacher, English teacher, said to me, that when people make these bells, they write an inscription on them. So I reach over and wipe the pigeon manure off one of the bells, and I ask the bell, why am I here? And the bell answers loud and clear. So at this time, I'd like to tell you the words inscribed on the Hayes Hall Tower bells, namely, all truth is one. In this light, may science and religion endeavor here for the steady evolution of mankind, from darkness to light, from narrowness to broad-mindedness, from prejudice to tolerance. It is the voice of life which calls us to come and learn. Thank you.